In this speech today, I will be discussing the reasons why I believe that the death penalty should be completely abolished in our country. I will go over the reasons for my beliefs, why nothing has been done so far, and my proposed policy to fix this important issue in our country. I hope that by the end of this speech, you too will realize the harm of the death penalty in our country and will join me in advocating for this policy that ultimately removes it from our law. The first reason why I believe that the death penalty should be abolished is the possibility of innocence for the people that are being put to death. According to the Equal Justice Initiative, for every 9 people that are put to death, 1 person is exonerated, as shown in this visual here. This means that roughly 10% of people are taken off of death row for some reason, whether that be innocence or new evidence that drops some of the charges and makes them ineligible for the death penalty. A prime example of this happening is Ruben Cantu. According to the Death Penalty Information Center, Ruben was a 17-year-old who was convicted of armed robbery and murder. He was tried as an adult in the state of Texas and was eventually found guilty and sentenced to death for the nature of the crime that he supposedly committed. After his execution, the eyewitness for the case came forward with some new information about what they saw that night. They said that Ruben might actually have not been the person that they even saw commit the murder. Throughout the trial, Ruben claimed he was innocent. Usually, when a person is obviously guilty, they will plead guilty to get a lesser punishment and cut a deal to make the trial go smoother and easier. This was not the case for Ruben's trial. The eyewitness said that the only reason they chose Ruben was because of pressure that was put on them by the police to choose a suspect. When a horrible act is committed, like armed robbery with murder, the public usually gets upset and pressures the police to find a suspect. When police are pressured by the public, they often pressure the witness to choose the person that they thought committed the crime. This can lead to eyewitness reports that aren't very accurate and can put someone's life at risk that may not even have committed the crime. So, this leads me to ask all of you this question. If there is even a slight chance that someone who is innocent could be put to death, then why can it be seen as ethical for these executions to take place? Or is there even such thing as an ethical execution of a human being despite the actions that they may have committed? The next reason for my proposed abolishment of the death penalty is the cost to American taxpayers. According to Nevada State Legislature, each execution cost taxpayers $1.26 million. The reason for this cost, according to the Death Penalty Information Center, is all of the legal costs of setting up the process to take someone's life. The Equal Justice Initiative claims in an article that this cost is around 10 times more expensive than letting the person convicted of the crime spend the rest of their life suffering in a prison cell. This isn't just a small cost difference. We're talking about a cost difference that is 10 times the amount of taxpayer dollars than the alternative. There aren't a huge amount of executions each year, with only 1,573 executions having taken place in the U.S. since 1973. But think about the difference that could be made if the extra money used for these kinds of things was put into programs for the homeless or was used to help veterans who have nothing when they come back from deployment. So this begs the question, why would our country waste more taxpayer dollars on the death penalty when keeping someone in prison for life without parole is 10 times cheaper? The criminal is still kept away from society and is never able to do any harm ever again. The next reason why I believe that the death penalty should be abolished in our country is the bias that sometimes comes along with it. According to the ACLU, since 1973, a disproportionate 43% of total executions have been people of color. Also, 55% of people on death row who are awaiting execution are people of color. Some people think that race may have something to do with whether or not someone receives the death penalty. As shown in this visual by the Pew Research Center, 56% of people say that African Americans are more likely to receive the death penalty for committing the same crime. Even if this bias is unconscious. The fact that skin color could have something to do with why someone is put to death just isn't right. Another bias that comes along with the death penalty is people with mental health issues. According to the ACLU, people with mental health disabilities are more likely to be put to death for the same crime than someone without a mental health disability. These biases go against everything that our justice system is supposed to stand for. It is supposed to be fair and unbiased. Its job is to get rid of crime and punish crime, not to target certain groups of people. So now that I've gone over the reasons that I think the death penalty should be abolished, let me tell you why nothing has been done yet. The death penalty is something that has been allowed in our country under the protection of the Constitution since 1976 as a result of the Gregg cases. These cases ruled that the death penalty was constitutional in a limited manner in the United States. I'm not sure if you all know this, but the Constitution is very hard to change. The Founding Fathers had a vision for this country, and we have made it our goal as a country to abide by the way that they saw fit for the country to be run. But times have changed. The things that were constitutional back when the Founding Fathers started the country were not all very good things, and we should be able to update the Constitution based on the way that our current society functions. With all of this being said, the process to change the Constitution is very long and tedious. With there not being a big enough push from the public to do anything about the death penalty, lawmakers haven't cared enough to go through with the process. One argument that people like to use in support of the death penalty is claiming that it deters crime. There isn't enough evidence that makes it worth the money, and there isn't enough evidence that makes this worth the money, the possibility of innocence of the person being executed, or the possible bias against people of color or the mentally disabled. Another argument that people use in support of the death penalty is that it brings closure to the family of the person who has had the crime committed against them to see the person who hurt them be put to death. But think about this. How would the family feel if they knew that the person was innocent and they only realized after the fact that they had just been the reason for putting an innocent person to death? With all this being said, I would like to introduce you to the policy that I think would make the most amount of people happy while getting rid of all the negatives that come along with the death penalty. For starters, I would like to propose a full ban of the death penalty by making it unconstitutional on the grounds that it violates cruel and unusual punishment, which is the Eighth Amendment of our Constitution. The Constitution says that the death penalty is legal unless the means of execution is cruel. But in my opinion, I argue that killing someone at all as a means of punishment is cruel. The policy would immediately overturn the Gregg cases of 1976. In order to achieve this, I will need to gather support and take this to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will then amend the Constitution and deem the punishment unconstitutional and make it a part of the cruel and unusual punishment amendment of our Constitution. The policy immediately ends the harms that I spoke of previously. It guarantees that there are no more wrongful executions. It helps to lessen the bias in the justice system, and it saves taxpayers in the U.S. millions of dollars each year. Criticism of this policy is expected. One criticism might be that the constitutionality of the death penalty has been ruled on already and deemed constitutional. My rebuttal to that is that there have been many instances where actions have been deemed constitutional and then later overturned when society realizes that the previous ruling was incorrect. An example of this is what happened in the 1960s with African Americans. At one time, it was legal to segregate African Americans based solely on the color of their skin through the separate but equal policy. We now understand how wrong that was and have become more educated since that time. Also, as shown in this upcoming visual made by the Death Penalty Information Center, 57% of people favor having life without parole as the most serious punishment for a crime. In conclusion, these are the reasons that I think something needs to be done about the death penalty and the policy that I propose to help out all of the stakeholders in this issue. I wholeheartedly believe that this policy is the best way to appease the most amount of people while solving all of the problems that come along with the death penalty. Thank you for your attention today and listening to this speech on why I think that the death penalty should be abolished and the policy that I propose to end it once and for all.